I was in 4th grade, and I had this babysitter that was across the street from my elementary school that I had to go stay with every day. But the babysitter was blind, and so I would try and sneak into the house without her knowing.
That seems like a disqualifier.
And then she had her whatever, I don't know, her brother or something, and the kid was really into playing with matches. And, little kids like, oh, you like to play with matches? You know how it is. So you're like, oh, okay, we're playing with matches today. And I got blamed. And then they were like, yeah, we can't watch Cole anymore because he likes to play with matches.
Oh, my God. I think we should roll into our episode. We should use all this. So I just want to say, if you hear something in the background, what's that noise that you're hearing?
That is a kitten. That is a very cute little kitten.
It is like super cute kitten. Which one is that?
That's Joey.
Hey, Joey. I think he knows his name. Look, he looked over here. He's playing on a shopping bag, which we're going to let him keep doing. So if it makes noise, that's all it is. Also, if you hear a siren, that's the other cat.
All right, are we ready?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Grande Bouffe.
The big feast.
With myself, Cole Smithey, and my co-host, Mike Lacy. As always, we are here to copiously consume international politics and culture through the prism of a single film and a different craft beer each week. Mike chose the beer today.
I did. Let's get into the beer. It's Peak. It's Peak. It's from a organic brewing company. Is it called Organic Brewing Company?
I think it's Peak Organic Brewing Company.
Peak Organic Brewing Company. Yeah, and this is just, I guess, this is just called, this wine is their IPA. It's a 7.1, and it's I'll be honest, I was a little skeptical, because I think I'm a little persuaded by branding, and this is no sort of Ralph Steadman thing going on. It's a very simplistic look, but it is a very... I was going to use the word precise tasting little IPA right here.
I like that description, and it's funny because I've seen this beer many times, but I've never bought it just because the label, in my opinion, just doesn't cut it. They need to get a better graphic designer. But
hook him up with Stephanie.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
our friend Stephanie, who's very reliable, does great work.
She did our logo that you're probably looking at right now.
That's right. Right. And so I don't find the label to be appealing, but the beer is just delicious. I really like it.
Yeah, it's light, obviously kind of citrusy because you get that tartness from the hops.
Mm-hmm, but it's also got just a little bit of skunkiness to it.
Yeah.
A little skunk.
Yeah, you don't want something like too sweet. You don't kind of want your like lemon notes to like undercut the hop edge that you get that. And then sometimes they throw in, wow, Cole, I feel like I'm actually gaining opinions about beer finally. Sometimes like they throw in herbal notes that kind of give you like this second sort of like side taste. Mm-hmm. And I almost feel like it's sort of distracting from like what the point of the IPA is a little bit. So, or they're like concerned that it's not interesting enough or that the hops are going to like bother you too much. But I say just like go for it, Just like don't be afraid that this is an unusual like acquired taste and you don't need to like have so much side business to like.
It's very refreshing. It's very crisp, and on this hot New York day, it's really not so bad today. It was 96 yesterday, I think.
It
got
was
up to 96
scorcher.
yesterday. Really bad.
I was helping my friends pick up an air conditioner. It was all like this whole deal. They had to
don't get me started on air conditioners.
Go to Crown Heights and they had to wait till 9:30 to pick it up. And some girl that would do it for $100 if they picked it up in this like one window of it's like
never wait until June if you live in a hot place like New York. Never wait until June to buy your air conditioner. Buy it in late February or March.
You know what I'm pushing?
Get it taken care of.
I'm pushing. So I don't have one in my home, so I can't talk that much. But I'm pushing these Vornado fans. You know about these? These circulating fans. I have
two of them in my bedroom.
Would you swear by them?
They're pretty good.
They're cool.
I run them all the time.
Because they move. Because it's basically a ceiling fan, right? Because a ceiling fan is not shooting cold air at you. It's just moving moving it.
Yeah. I call them I pronounce it Verado. Maybe it's Vernado. I don't know.
It's Vernado.
Vernado. Tomato. But yeah, they push a lot of air. They're like little turbojets.
Right.
They push a lot of air. I love them.
Right. So that's the thing. It's not just getting that cold air because an AC, man, they hook.
All right, I got an air conditioner story for you.
I'm ready.
So we had this air conditioner. I believe it was a Panasonic. So for personally, I will never buy another Panasonic air conditioner.
But you could use like a universal remote to control it.
Well, this one had its own remote, but the problem was that it had this little beeper, this little sensor beeper thing, and it just would go off willy-nilly anytime. So it would wake you up in the middle of the night.
The cat touched my foot.
And I got fed up with it. So Catherine she was still at work, and I get in there, Cole, the engineer, I get in and I take the thing apart, and air conditioners are no joke to take apart. I mean, there's layers of stuff that you have to unscrew these panels and stuff to get into the thing where the little sensor mechanism is. And so, but I had to plug the thing back in to find out where the because
do you know what the sensor is doing?
Yeah, it was beeping. It was the beeper. I needed to disable the beeper. That was my mission. Okay.
Waiter, can I disable the beeper?
Yeah, and so here's the thing. I did it. I was so pleased with myself. I got in there and I disabled that little motherfucking thing. But guess what I didn't do?
You disabled the carbon monoxide element of it.
I didn't unplug the air conditioner the last time because I was kept unplugging and plugging it back in. Very dangerous, by the way. And I touched something with the screwdriver and shorted the whole damn thing.
Oh.
So I had. But Catherine had come home at some point, so she had witnessed my glory, where I had somehow disabled. I had achieved my mission. I had disabled the beeper, and then I fried the whole air conditioner. And by this time, of course, did I mention that it was 95 degrees at 8 p.m. And so I'm just dripping sweat, and I had to carry, because all air conditioners weigh 200 pounds. I think that's a rule. They just all have to weigh 200 pounds. So I had to lug my air conditioner down 2 flights of stairs to the street to put it on the street that I had just ruined.
It's not, I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen a movie, but you can just push it out the window.
I've almost done that accidentally once or twice.
I hate when things come with unnecessary like lights and like beeping noises on it, This is getting back to what I was complaining about IPAs. You just throw crap in it because you're nervous. Like I got a nice like air cleaning fan and you can press a button and like a UV thing happens. Except it shoots out a light that fills your whole bedroom in the dark. And it's like, okay, get rid of that shit.
Yeah, I don't need any little extra blue light. I don't need any beeping crap to know that it's working.
Every external hard drive I have is like a fucking like Star Trek display that's just keeping me up at night with all these things flashing and bleeping around.
Yeah, it defeats the purpose. All right, well, we have to jump into this movie because this is a Paul Schrader film. I've got a Paul Schrader story. He made a version of The Exorcist.
He wrote it. Right.
Paul Schrader wrote and directed this movie.
He directed it. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, very awesome. Key. And if you don't know who Paul Schrader is, he's the guy who wrote Taxi Driver. While living in his car in Los Angeles, he wrote Taxi Driver.
He lived this shit.
He had broken up with his girlfriend, and he just didn't have anywhere to be, so he was living in his car. And somewhere Taxi Driver, I believe, came out in 1976. This film, 1979, and I just want to make sure that this could be the first movie that he directed.
I just gotta come out swinging. I fucking love this movie.
I have wanted to see this movie, Mike, for so long. I've wanted, because George C. Scott's always amazing, anything that guy does. And it's a Paul Schrader movie, and it's called Hardcore. But I've never seen this movie until now.
So, like, I remember reading Easy Riders and Raging Bulls, and I didn't think to look if this is mentioned in it, but it's all about the Schrader era stuff, the BBS movies, the early Scorsese stuff, and obviously him and Scorsese had already worked together. I don't like, maybe there's a paragraph on this movie, maybe there's nothing on it, but this is a forgotten gem. It is super cool, and it's of a genre of movies that I kind of really love, and I'm like remembering that I love it. It's a bit like you ever see Falling Down with Michael Douglas.
Yeah.
It's basically like white guys going bad.
Yeah.
You know?
Blue Collar was the first film that he directed, and this is his second film. So this is the second movie that Paul Schrader directed, and I'm such a fan of Schrader's work, so I want to just go down the list a little bit for the listeners. 1978, he wrote and directed Blue Collar. Then he did Hardcore. Then he did American Gigolo. Then he did Cat People. Then he did
American Gigolo is Richard Gere, correct?
That's right, with the Blondie soundtrack. Awesome song. And then he did a documentary, Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters. And then he did Light of Day, Patty Hearst, The Comfort of Strangers, Light Sleeper, Touch, Affliction, for which I'm pretty sure he won. That movie got an Academy Award of some color, some stripe. Forever Mine, Autofocus, which is a great movie, and Autofocus, it has some similarities to this film.
I did make my last girlfriend watch Autofocus with me.
Oh, it's such a great movie.
And I really think her reaction was, "Why are you making me watch this movie?" Yeah, I loved it.
And I did the roundtable interviews for that film, so I interviewed a lot of the actors and stuff when that movie came out. But then Dominion, prequel to The Exorcist, which sadly I think is probably the worst. Well, I don't know. The Canyons is maybe it's maybe worse.
A prequel to The Exorcist.
Yeah, it's called Dominion, prequel to The Exorcist. And my wife and I, before we were married, we went to a screening of it at Warner Brothers studio. This little screening room that holds like 50 people, and Schrader was there. And so after the screening, we got to stand out in the lobby and chat with Schrader. We had a private audience with Schrader for 15 to 20 minutes. And he's just the nicest guy. And you can really, I mean, you know, he's a complex personality, as you get from this particular film, because this is probably the most autobiographical film, because it really touches on his Calvinist roots.
Yeah, if I remember, so it's that same book, Easy Riders and Raging Bulls. It talk about his backstory a bit.
I remember laying on the beach in Cannes reading that book.
It's essential for, especially the movies that we tend to cover, really like hover around that. I remember. Here's what I remember is that he did have a very religious upbringing. I didn't remember that specifically Calvinist, but I knew that it was very kind of puritanical in that way.
Yeah, I don't think he even saw a movie until he was 18 or 19.
Yeah, no television, really out of modernity, outside of it. He and his brother had a very intense creative relationship, and then what I kind of remember is that they just got in a car, moved to LA, and pretty quickly went from one extreme of being
completely sheltered,
not of this world, and sheltered, to very much in it, cocaine, guns, just living on the edge,
porn,
and we'll get into it. I really imagine that if you were in the 1970s, late 70s, early 80s, sex work scene in California, this movie would be virtually a documentary. It is. Yeah. It is not Pretty Woman. No. It's not.
And I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that some of the sex shops that he goes into,
they have to be real.
They're real. He was just going and shooting. So this movie has a time capsule quality of what it was like. And I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, in the fan district, close to practically on the campus of VCU, and there was there were little porn shops. There was the Lee Art House, that was the cinema that just showed porn all the time, and then a block further was the Biograph, that was an art house that showed the latest John Sayles movie or whatever, and but the porn industry of the 70s that really came to fruition with things like Deep Throat. It's
Was Debbie a big deal? Why do I know
Debbie Does Dallas.
Yeah, how big of a deal was that really?
Debbie Does Dallas and Deep Throat were essential. You had to see. They were such cultural touchstones.
Right.
You had to see those movies. I worked at a hot tub place in San Diego, and I remember that Debbie Does Dallas was just always on the screen.
Think about Deep Throat. It's like really put in relief that it's like now more known as the code word from the guy from Watergate, but like that's how ubiquitous it was that Mark Felt, which is his real name, which we learned not that long ago, picking a, I don't know if it's Woodward and Bernstein or him, but it was like, what's a topical like word to call somebody, code name? Deep Throat. You know, it was exceptionally relevant.
Yeah, this is in the days of X-rated and triple X, as if you need like triple X.
Yeah, and it's also like no, pornography is so much more ubiquitous now and so much less culturally relevant. It's very fascinating.
I really want to dig into this issue because George C. Scott's character, I love the way this movie opens.
Let's frame it. Let's leave aside all this California porn stuff and talk about the other very vividly depicted and earnestly like portrayed world, which is Iowa,
the family life and
Calvinist Iowa
of Iowa, and there's a piano in the house, and it's Christmas time, and
snow. Like
the brother-in-law of the wife that he's no longer with, we'll talk more about that, who's played by Dick Sargent, who was the first I Dream of Jeannie guy.
Right, yeah.
He got thrown off the show.
They swapped him off.
Yeah. And is it Dick York or Dick Sargent? Now I'm confused.
Look it up. Like Dick Sargent's super familiar, but is that I think
it's funny that both guys who played Jeannie's husband were named Dick.
Oh, were they?
Yeah, evidently. Let's see. And of course, Peter Boyle is in the Dick Sargent. Yeah, is the guy Dick Sargent. Yeah, and Peter Boyle's great in this as the private detective.
But yeah, but at the beginning we just get this very like pristine Christian family,
it's
which
so Christian. It's snowy outside.
George C. Scott's turning off the it's not like the Macy's Day Parade, but it's a sort of like a holiday
and
caroling.
All
thing.
The family is sitting there watching it,
and he's like, turn off this crap. This TV's ruin everybody, and it's the most wholesome thing in the world. And then the sort of the
well, puritanical. I don't know if wholesome's the word I'd go for. It's a very puritanical existence.
Sorry, I was saying like the TV is like
yeah.
It's compared to other recorded things that will be shown in this movie.
Right.
It's like it could not be more tame, and he thinks it's kind of corrupting their minds.
Yeah.
And then the kids in their like mid-20s, sort of the half generation before these kids are singing carols. They're very pure themselves, and it's just. But what I want to say is like it's not cynical. And we see them at church, and it's not cynical. It's honest, and
But you got to talk about the scene that happens between the two girls at church in the gym.
I will in a second. But like, there's like one thing that struck me from the Christian, the evangelical kind of people, and these aren't evangelicals, but like the sort of the most staunchly Christian people I know are evangelical. Is there's an argument happening. It's like a 10-second scene, but family members are quoting from memory certain Bible scriptures and having a theological argument. And it's just like this tinge of richness that he does with every subculture is you get a sense like, oh, this wasn't like research, this was lived. And that is something that Schrader always does so effectively is...
And he there's a scene in the movie, later in the movie, when George C. Scott's character is with a prostitute who's
literally just with.
Just with. Yeah, but he explains Calvinism. He talks about the beliefs, and he talks about so Schrader really seamlessly puts in all of this great exposition and theme into the movie that you learn something from it.
You do. It's something which has tinges of and is about exploitation, but you literally emerge knowing more about Calvinist theology, about Venusianism. It's really fascinating, and I have to say it's like I enjoy Taxi Driver a lot, but I think I enjoy it the most for its directing and the sort of thrill ride of it. This movie instantly connected with me on a character and a plot level that was like much more immediate, and I was like swept up in it in a way that I didn't expect. And I also thought that it was, though it could not be cinematically more different than Scorsese's sort of really grandiose and like stylistic shooting, it was very well composed, very intelligently shot.
Yep.
Like it. If it wasn't storyboarded precisely, it absolutely felt like it. It was not your sort of cookie cutter.
It's a flawed film. I don't think it's a great movie. I would if I was looking at it from a critical perspective and reviewing it, I think I'd probably give it a B.
I mean, I'll wait till the end because I want to hear what you have to say.
Maybe a B plus.
I'd certainly say a B plus, but one of those like B pluses where it's like, but I love it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Nothing wrong with a good B plus.
But you wanted to get to the scene, which is the most of a seed of what the inciting incident is that we get, and it is not a lot.
Not much.
But there's a scene. They're at the church, and they're
in the gymnasium of the church.
It's the daughter of George C. Scott and the niece or the cousin of the girl, and her name is Kristen.
I don't know. Doesn't matter.
I feel like we should know her. Like, yeah. She's what? Just a blank slate kind of.
No. The thing that she's sexualizing. She's introducing this sexual.
What is George C. Scott's daughter's name though in the movie?
Okay.
It's not. She goes by Joanne. I know that.
Yeah.
She goes by Joanne. I think it's Kristen. But while you're looking at that, it's said like maybe 3 times, so it's you can't blame us that much, but. She's there with her cousin, and her cousin is talking about like, have you ever played chicken with a boy? You know, and it's a very like relatable thing of being like a teenager and having your sexuality emerged, and what chicken is the cousin traces her finger in like a box and like a circle
on the
girl's chest, circling like towards like her breast and her nipple, and like it's when the girl says chicken, then the boy has to stop doing it.
Yeah,
and it's literally the only scene we see of these girls.
Kristen, yeah, her name's the daughter's name is Kristen.
It is Kristen.
Yeah,
it's like the only little like insight that there is any sort of burgeoning desire to act in a way that this doesn't conform with this community. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing we know, she's gone missing.
She's gone. She goes on is it a school field trip to California?
It's a church trip.
Church trip.
It's the church. There's one joke. Did you pick up on this joke? Is they're calling out the names for all these Calvinists, these Dutch Calvinists to get on the bus, and it's like Van Dyke, Van Doren, Van Eysen, Van Lafayette. Like,
oh my God.
Van Wolski. Van Van.
And was it Disneyland where she vanished?
No, it was Knoxbury Farms.
Ah, okay.
Which is a cultural reference to Southern California. Is that Southern California? It's
L.A. area.
L.A. I don't know, San Diego-ish. California, you're a kind of a big question mark to me. I've been through you, and I don't really get you. But yeah, it's...
You know I went to San Diego State, right?
Is it near Knoxbury Farms?
Knoxbury Farms.
Farms or farm?
It's farm. Yeah, sorry, farm. 160 acres in Buena Park, California. Buena Park.
Well, so they're at an amusement park. The story that we're told is that she was with a boy and then she disappeared. And soon enough, George C. Scott has flown out to California
to find his daughter,
to talk to the police, to find a daughter. And there's a cop who looks like an American Roman Polanski
What about the cop who's like got
That's
the
what I'm
weird,
talking about.
the weird scar and his eye is all bloodshot? He's like he was like he's still recovering from the axe fight that he was in 3 months ago.
It's amazing. It's just this little piece
the
where
casting is
this cop
very
who's given the spiel,
very
who's
real.
given the spiel about like, look, I mean, we're gonna do our best in front of your daughter, but like, there's a lot of kids missing, you know, and like, you know, best of luck. We find her and she's not undead, you know. Did I say that right? Like, look, we're doing our best. We got 2 people working on it. It's our A team. They're only drunk most of the time. You know, it's like, it's a bleak scene, and so it's kind of suggested that he hire a private investigator and enter fucking peak era Boyle. Killing it.
Peter Boyle, who you will recall was in Taxi Driver, was also played the monster in Young Frankenstein.
He did. He was a guy I went to. I was in a writing class with a kid, Danny, and he was Danny's grandfather.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. He passed away a few years ago. I remember when he died.
When I knew Danny, it wasn't very long after. I think he was fairly close, and so it was interesting because I did watch Everybody Loves Raymond, and he's the dad on that. I think that's actually at this point what he's like most known for is being the dad on Everybody Loves Raymond, and you know it was a little bit of like everyone's grandfather dying who had watched that show, and he was like, yeah, well, he was my actual grandfather. Yeah,
that's awesome.
But a shout out to Danny. I hope you're doing well.
My wife went to Buxton High School, and she just had her 30-year reunion at Buxton, and she went to high school with Justin Theroux.
Oh, that's so cool.
And he was little Justin then. He was skateboarding around. He was a little shrimpy kid.
Just widows peeking the fuck out of that high school.
It's a crazy high school because they only have 90 students. It's a boarding school.
Wow.
And John, how do you say his name? Gonzale? I confuse him with Johnny Thunders now.
Who?
Casale, Meryl Streep's first husband.
From Fredo. John
Cazale.
Cazale, yeah.
He was in The Godfather.
He was in 3 movies, nominated for Academy Awards, and like 2 of them.
Dog Day Afternoon.
He was in like 5 movies maybe, but yeah, Godfather 1, 2, Dog Day Afternoon, The Deer Hunter. Yeah,
Deer Hunter.
And not to mention Conversation.
The Conversation. Yeah.
I don't think he was in.
Phenomenal actor, and everyone who ever met him or worked with him just loved that guy.
Yeah.
His approach to acting was very pure.
Yeah, he brings an essential element to The Godfather. He brings
absolutely. That scene with Fredo is such a heartbreaker. Woo.
Well, even in the first one where he's fumbles for the gun when Vito gets shot and he's crying next to the oranges, and it's just this, this pathetic humanness,
this vulnerability.
You know, because without that movie's just full of fucking tough guy next to tough guy, and he's just this. This element of vulnerability through and through, and he brings into a lot of stuff.
So anyway, we're back to the hardcore thing. So Peter Boyle is the private detective, the L.A. private detective, and Knott's Berry Farm. It's just a little bit inland from Long Beach and from Torrance, so it's de facto central, a little bit inland LA. Oh, inland. Yeah, okay. A little bit inland from Huntington Beach and Long Beach.
So this movie is really about this man from middle America having to deal with this fucking sexed up, like post-hippie culture that is like a way too awakened, and he's just plowing through it. It's 1970s version of Taken. And it's 10 times better and fucking raw and intense, you know?
Yeah.
And
well, I like to say it's like the connector between Taxi Driver and Paris, Texas.
I like that. I want to back up one bit for a scene that I liked.
1979, by the way.
1979. Yeah. It is more 70s than 80s, I feel.
It is. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, because
it crosses because it goes up to San Francisco, so it really gives you this perspective of the porn culture of the time and how there was just this saturation of, I guess they called them smut shops, but every town had them, and there were just, I love the marital aids. Every sign says marital aids on the front of these places.
What I connected it to was the marijuana dispensary thing happening now is this sort of cultural shift of acceptance and intolerance, sort of at the
but also
begrudgingly, like a lot of America, people in the States aren't into it, but you're having this sort of tipping point of acceptance of this.
Well, it was such a gnarly, rebellious thing that was occurring in this puritanical country. We still live, America is still, by all standards, a very puritanical place.
Yeah,
and this movie really spells that out, and you can see how that stuff gets compartmentalized socially in this very concrete way.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to the podcast The Dollop, which did a series on the I'm trying to remember what the episode was called, but it was about the guys who basically invented the idea of the strip club. And the person who they were fighting a lot of the time in San Francisco, it was future U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein, who was shutting them down left and right. And kind of their MO was to trailblaze with having a sex shop or a strip venue, and to just do the next craziest thing where it's like, all right, so here's what the show's going to be, okay? It's going to be ladies, this is a real one, it's going to be ladies lying down on the stage with their legs open with a tissue box next to them. Guys pay $25 to get in and then $45 to get on the stage. You get on the stage and then you get on your knees and you sit on a blanket and you get to lick the lady's vagina, and then you have to take a tissue and clean the vagina to remove any germs, and then the next guy gets on his knees and gets to lick the vagina.
Tissue is going to do anything.
And so, and like, what wound up really sticking was a much like toned down version of this, which was like the lap dance. They invented the lap dance, but just in America, which most of it was like George C. Scott. They like shifted the norm of what's acceptable, that the idea of having a place where a woman in her underwear or less would like dance on you and like prompt you to near or complete like ejaculation just short of actual intercourse.
It's like a bad, it's like a joke. If you have to explain it, it's not good. But
it's like interesting. It's like they knew that they had to push it so far so that you could make the norm.
Well, it's the politicians exploiting the exploitation.
Yeah,
which is crazy. And guess what? They win. They won. That worked. That worked for them. Right.
And so so you had like through the agenda,
almost as if they had devised it themselves.
Almost like shutting these things down gives you power and gets you into the U.S. Senate. Mm-hmm. So you.
It's called a false flag, I think.
I would say like more like there's a lot of more false breasts involved in this kind of thing, but
well, not in the 70s.
That's true. I'll tell you what there. Yeah, no.
In the 70s,
I'll tell you the 70s movies, because like there's
Bush and there's saggy breasts.
There was a lot of. I'm gonna not get into this.
No, yeah, you have to. The movie's called Hardcore. Okay,
it's called Hardcore. But there was.
We haven't even talked about. We haven't brought this context into like Pornhub and stuff, which we should.
This is gonna be our longest episode.
I know, it could be.
There's a lot of women whose physique you wouldn't imagine seeing. I think in a strip club now. There were smaller breasts, more like unusual bodies. Like it was more, I think, just about like the human element of like titillation and that these things were possible, but it was also very banal already, which I think Schrader is pointing out with this kind of running gag that to continue the plot too a little bit, George C. Scott is hopping from these sex club to sex club because he wants to find someone who knows where his daughter is, and he's like running blind. Yeah, he doesn't understand this world.
He hires Peter Boyle, the private detective, for $750 plus expenses. $750 a week plus expenses.
Yeah,
a lot of money in 1979. That's a lot of money.
It's not a lot of money right now.
That's true.
$750 plus expenses.
Yeah,
I would totally take that.
Yeah, that was a lot of money. I mean, to put it in context, I'm guessing that if you were going to put it in 2017 context, that's probably like, I don't know, $3,000, $3,500 a week.
I would imagine something like that. And Peter Boyle, I mean, am I wrong in saying he doesn't really do shit? He just kind of takes the money.
No, he's a schmuck.
He hangs out on some porn sets, shows the picture once or twice. Well, I love
the turning. There's an early turning point in George C. Scott's character, which I love, where he goes from being the stodgy old white guy looking for his daughter to like, okay, I'm going to play the game now. I'm going to become a fake porn film producer so that I can.
That's when I knew I loved this movie.
Oh yeah, me too, because he goes out and he gets the wardrobe, he gets the sunglasses, he really throws down.
He's wearing a tie-dye shirt, a fake mustache, and like a floppy wig.
Does he do the fake mustache?
He has a fake mustache which he rips off after he kicks that fucking hippie that fucked his daughter in his face. Ouch. You fucking scum! This is Patton. We haven't brought that up. This is fucking Patton in a movie like where he like imagine Patton having to watch. I'm Cole. We're really shitty at our jobs. We find out what Peter Boyle does is he comes back with an 8mm film of his daughter getting fucked by two guys.
That's
and
right.
He plays it for him in a little Grand Rapids theater.
That's right.
And so he goes up to California to find his fucking daughter.
Yeah.
And, you know, pretty soon, like, he realizes Peter Boyle's not doing shit. He's wasting his money.
Well, he realizes that when he walks in on Peter Boyle with a young prostitute in his apartment, and of course, Boyle's character isn't smart enough to keep his front door locked. So
which he calls out.
George C. Scott just walks right in, but that shoe shows up on the other foot at another point when later in the movie when Boyle walks in on George C. Scott with a young hooker, and
yes, let's maybe put a pin in it, but it's like, you know, ultimately like
I like the Sarah Silverman
what
quote there.
Which one?
Put a pin in it. That's the Sarah Silverman thing. She loves that.
Oh, I say that all the time now.
Oh, that's a great thing. I love it.
Let's put a pin in it. But I will say, the real relationship that's developed in this movie, kind of as I'll just go into it right now. You know,
all right, go for it.
We're not gonna. I'm getting too drunk to like coherently just go plot point by plot point.
No.
But what I would say really happens sort of emotionally in this movie is that George C. Scott befriends a sex worker who is essentially a surrogate for his daughter and for the new generation that is sexually liberated. And they have, as you brought up before, a real conversation. They honestly discuss through the course of several scenes their worldviews and
sex.
And she's into this new agey thing that sounds kind of ridiculous. It's Venusianism, you know, and like even I think the movie is a little bit like being like, isn't this silly? And then he, in a stodgy but earnest way, explains Calvinism. And you know what? Like, it sounds just as ludicrous, but there is a earnesty that they both have. They're both trying to understand each other. And so when Peter Boyle walks in on him being in this hotel room with this hooker, he's, you know, just kind of assumes that this man has, like, you know, sold himself out and that he portrays himself as the image of virtue and that he was, you know, he made Peter Boyle look like a schmuck for buying the hookers on his dime. But what's really going on is so much more interesting than just George C. Scott being like, like one version of this movie. I feel like if they remade this movie, it would have been him just like and something like
it would be Liam Neeson. There would be a lot more gunfire.
But towards the end of Act 2, if it was like a religious guy looking for his daughter, towards the end of Act 2, he'd be like going down on like 3 chicks and getting like fucked in the butt. And like, and you know what? Like that's a movie you can make, and like there's a story there. But this isn't.
I don't think that. But you might be able to make that movie and get and have a good payday.
I guarantee you get it made, you make money. But this movie is writing a more interesting line, which is George C. Scott. He's not trying to get fucked. He's offered sex left and right.
Oh yeah,
and almost not even out of being too virtuous. It is very very taken. He's looking for his daughter.
And so
that's what his priority is.
Nikki is a prostitute that we're talking about, and she's played by Susan Hubley.
This is an amazing character, an amazing performance.
Great performance, and they really do share a connection. And it's true. There's almost a leaving Las Vegas quality to their relationship, because there's that sense of doom that's hanging over it. How things are going to go. Things are going to go badly for her, not for him.
Right. There's this it's just something very like expected and classic and tragic about it. It's tragic because it's coming, and that's that's the sort of like thing with tragedy, is that there's an inevitability, which is she has that sort of like, it's somewhat of like an addict's perspective of like, oh, this next thing is going to save me. It's going to work out. And Peter Boyle, who knows this world, he's seen a million girls like this, he doesn't he's like, fucking dime a dozen, a piece of ass.
Let's talk about that, because this is like a key thematic point in the movie. I think it's Peter Boyle's character is explaining how how society is. This movie is all about culture shock. And so he's telling George C. Scott's character, Jake, he's telling him, you can pay for anything. You can have somebody killed, blah-de-da-de-da.
Sex with children.
Right. And
sex slave.
That's such an important scene in this movie, because everything that he said in that moment is true today. It'll cost you a lot more today, but it is true. And there's a snuff film element to this movie. And back in 1979, the CIA and the FBI were really covering up snuff. And if you don't know what a snuff film is, that's when somebody actually gets killed.
Did you tell me that? No, I feel like I heard this otherwise. There was the official, I've heard this in other places. Yeah. The official policy of the U.S. government, my understanding, is that snuff films
did not exist.
They did not exist.
Yeah. They were,
Did you tell me that?
Yeah.
But, right. And so there is I think this could be a great screenplay to teach a writing courses because I would say, where do you think that comes? I think it's roughly towards the end of Act 2 of 3 is there's a threshold crossed with this.
It's in the third act.
Yeah. I think maybe the beginning of it is the beginning of the third act. I would say there's a threshold cross where our hero, George C. Scott,
Jake,
he's coming.
Jake Van Dorn.
Jake Van Dorn's coming from the familiar homeland of the sort of pure Calvinist world into the crazy modern world, and we're sort of laughing at him as he deals with the things that from 2017 we accept, and from sort of liberated 1979 we're like, oh come on, it'll be great, it's all,
why are you so provincial?
Why to like. And this is where Schrader is fucking brilliant. There is still a line. It's a line we hold today. It's like there is still a threshold to cross that, like what is viewed as seedy isn't that terrible. People in sex work, they're not monsters. And in fact, some of them have like much purer hearts than the people you'll meet back in Iowa. But you will meet in this world monsters darker than you can imagine, and there is one.
Rattan.
It's so like it turns into a kung fu movie all of a sudden.
And it's so great how the character of course, you sense when you meet the character that because he's not disclosing his identity that, oh, that's really him, isn't it? And then that does pay off because it turns out that that person really is the person who he said he wasn't. And we get to this scene where I believe he pays $100 to see this snuff film. And we get to see enough of it to know that it's a snuff film. It's a real, somebody died making this movie.
Yeah.
And
it's a world within a world.
And I want to, I want to escalate it a little bit because this stuff is available. Like now you can just go on the internet and you can just watch this stuff right now. And it's pretty disturbing when you think about how far we've come from 1979 when, sure, there were all these seedy characters and monsters, but now that stuff it's not mainstream yet, but compared to where it was from 1979, it is mainstream because anybody with an internet connection can go on and watch it.
So let's talk about Pornhut. Let's talk about where we are now because
you won't see it on Pornhub. I don't think you'll see it on Pornhub.
No, I know. But let's talk about the normalization of
extreme pornography and violence.
Well,
they have all these names for it, like Aftermath, right? And Blood,
Yeah, I mean, it's just the normalization of pornography, of consuming the work of people in sex work. The normalization of this, and then also there is a line. Compared to the social mores of 100 years ago, we've really gone off the deep end, but there are lines into pedophilia, into videos of people actually being hurt, people being abused, that are still a line. And I think what the movie is good at demonstrating is the tension of people like Jake Van Dorn not trusting that line is very thick. Mm-hmm. The fear is that your daughter runs off to California, mm-hmm. and one, she is in a film having sex with people and disgraces herself. Mm-hmm. But two, it's almost like he doesn't even know to be afraid of the fact that, like, maybe she'll be murdered mm-hmm. on camera. This mm-hmm. whole, which is a bit of a escalated fear.
It's a stretch.
But this is it's almost like a marijuana being a gateway drug where it's a false equivalency, but it makes sense. It's like pot's usually the first drug that people do, but most people don't go on to do heroin. But everyone who did heroin probably did start with pot.
Big Pharma's taken that whole thing over. I mean,
now, they're killing it. Yeah, they're really taking the marketplace and just replacing it with fucking Lexapro, and then you get on Oxycontin because you hurt your leg and you're fucked.
I mean, that's what's going on in the country. If you look at it, I think probably a good 35% of the country is hooked on some kind of prescription narcotic.
Yeah, it's interesting to see where the
painkillers,
the what is allowed to become legalized and what is still kept as nefarious, And I think typically it's whatever is not corporately profitable,
Absolutely.
I mean, I would have to say that pornography is legal because it can make enough money for people who can lobby for it to be legal, where sex work, prostitution has a hard time accumulating capital in a way that those people can lobby for it. Well, it's nothing to do with its inherent morality.
Not to put too fine a point on it, but if you look at where this movie comes from in 1979, where everything, all of this culture, to a certain degree, it was out in the open because these sex shops were in San Francisco and Richmond, Virginia, and Dayton, Ohio.
That's a good point. We haven't talked about it. You don't see it like that.
All that stuff is gone.
I've been all around New York City, and you watch Taxi Driver, and it's Time fucking Square.
Yeah.
And
It was nothing but sex
what's
shops.
there now is just the M&M store, you know? And you see sex toy shops, but you don't see sex. So it's a very interesting period where
and it was pornography that created the internet. And everything that has happened, all the breakthroughs that have happened on the internet, my website included. When I told my designer that I needed a revamp on my website, it wasn't until I told him that I wanted it to look more like a porn site that he got it. And so we wouldn't have the internet if it weren't for pornography.
I think there's a lot of truth in the idea that a lot of innovation comes from where there's the most attention, there's the most like what people want, and
it's universal.
And I've been saying this for about like 7 years now, is that HBO Go is one of the worst fucking designs websites in the world, and they have the worst video players, and it's gotten marginally better, but it's shit. And give me any fucking porn site, and they understand how to have a fucking like H.264 player that doesn't fuck up on me like half the time.
Yeah.
But it's right. Why is it? It's because there's money, because there's interest, because it's a need, because it's a desire. But I really like this idea of looking at it through the lens of the legalization of marijuana, which is still controversial, and I think very, very possibly, if there's a lesson to learn from the proliferation of sex shops in the 70s and 80s, is it could disappear. You know why? And because there's a simple reason. Because you can grow marijuana in your house, and you can sell sex in your house, but you can only sell pornography through a theater, through a distribution chain, through things that can accumulate capital. Through a website, where you can have a lobbying group do it. But if it's just something that a man grows out of his house, a woman grows out of his house, if it's something that a woman does out of her apartment to make money, you're not going to have the same lobbying ability, because cash is king and the morality is fucking moot. It's not what it's about. So if you could sell far worse drugs that fuck you up and make people addicted and destroy them, but the profits go to big pharma, which can get over half of like Congress elected through their influence, then you'll be giving kids fucking opioids, which is a fact. And so, yeah.
But it's funny, and big pharma, not to put too fine a point on it, but their campaigning, the way that they stay so aloof is just so effective. They're untouchable. They are just completely untouchable.
I hadn't really thought about it like this, but I'm just gonna toot my own horn. And this comparison is, it is illegal in virtually every state to have sex for money. But if a third party pays you to have sex with another person and films it and then sells that, 100% legal in, I believe, every state. What is that about?
Well, there you go.
What it's about is that
exploitation.
It's exploitation, and if there's any moral component to it, it's that it's more sort of people being used and objectified. But also, I do think it is the way that the money flows, and like any industry, as long as it flows into a group of people that can make collective action and throw cash around, they will. Because, the porn industry did absolutely have a big financial impact and ultimately defeated the attempts to shut it down. Dianne Feinstein's best efforts notwithstanding. But we see less of these sex shops. It is true.
Obviously this is a movie that was very much of a time. You could not make a movie like this today. This movie would have to be taken. It would have to be Liam Neeson.
That's the only direction they would go.
You couldn't because there's nothing. Where would the audience? I don't know.
You would have a evangelical guy who would ultimately seem like he was attempting to live in another world. Because one thing is, we are interconnected in a way and that we weren't then, and someone in 1979 Iowa viewing the world as a pure Calvinist and really thinking about the elect, about the predestined, or thinking about predestination, these concepts, they're, for people to believe as earnestly in them now, we have to apply a tone, and maybe this isn't wrong of us, but we have to apply a tone of them being sort of stalwarts or being just willfully ignorant and fighting against it, and evangelical in a way that Jake comes across as these are his beliefs. This is the world he's from, and this is what he wants. He's a good guy. I want to bring up one scene. I meant to bring it up earlier.
I just want to say, if Jake were going to be, if you were going to assign a political party to him, he would certainly be a Republican.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I also wanted to point out that John Milius, who made Big Wednesday, produced this movie. He executive produced this film.
Can I bring up one scene and that I just thought was very interesting because there's no loop back to it. I want to hear what you think is, but the beginning, we see Jake at work, and he owns a manufacturing company of some kind, right?
Yeah.
And there's a woman there who he clearly has feelings for, who is his like designer of his like a display. And the closest you can do to come onto her is to say, "Are you still seeing that guy in the other town? He's a good one. Don't let go of him." And it's clear what.
Do you think he's coming on to her? I didn't get that. Really,
yeah,
really.
I think that's the closest you can come to be like.
Because what I got was that she had already broken up with that guy. She wasn't dating that guy anymore, but because he had said that, she couldn't. He painted her into a corner, and she couldn't address it.
I think it's kind of. I think it's. Like
here's a finer point that I like in the movie is that he lies about his wife. He says that his wife is deceased.
Right.
But we find out through his conversations with the prostitute that in fact, and she susses it out. She figures it out that his wife isn't really dead. She left him,
and which does a great job for kind of hanging a lampshade, if not a more legitimate form of exposition of why this guy is so obsessed with chasing his daughter down that he's like playing characters and just like breaking with who he is because he's not going to let another person he cares about just leave him because he's too backwater, he's too simplistic. And it's an interesting journey because he really does, in a way, I think by the end of the movie, he understands what is going on with the new generation likely more than his daughter does.
I think that's true.
I think he comes away with a philosophical comprehension of what's happening, where before he couldn't watch the Macy's Day Parade effectively on TV without cringing. And by the end of it, he's seen his daughter get fucked on camera. He's seen a Snuff
somebody
film.
get killed on camera.
He's seen people shot to death. He's really like he like absolutely goes through it. It is like spiraling through like
it's
the
a trial
hero's
by
quest
fire
journey. It's like it's it's very Campbellian, this thing. Like it's like
Joseph,
by the book.
Joseph Campbell, yeah. But yeah, you come out of the movie. You need to take a little walk after you see this movie. I had to walk up to the reservoir and kind of watch the sunset after I watched this thing because it just kind of fried me. But yeah, then you have to think about, so where does this character go from here? What's going to become of Jake now? He gets his daughter. Spoiler alert.
But in modern parlance, he's woke now.
Yeah.
How's he gonna? Yeah, like how's he going back to Iowa?
Exactly.
How is he going to deal with having seen both the humanity and the inhumanity of the world outside of his Calvinist roots? In Calvinism, it is Schrader's religion, right? But it is as he describes, it's an exceptionally narrow view of salvation, but also.
Yeah, there's winners and losers.
Which
is a very right-wing conceit to begin with.
It's been prejudged who they will be, but there is an anonymity to who they would be. Everyone has the potential at the end to be saved. And who seems to not be saved, and we talked about this, it's his relationship with, what is her name? The sex worker he's hanging out with the whole time. You brought her up.
Nikki.
I'm sorry, Nikki. She has this there's this fatedness to her. We were talking about like the tragedy of it. And the tragedy is that she's like, oh, maybe Jake will take me back to Iowa, like she has much hints that that's what she wants. And Peter Boyle is the kind of, the realist cynic of like, you really think that's going to happen? Like, are you kidding me? And there's a moment where it looks like he's almost considering asking her, to come back. She's probably 7 years older than his daughter. But she knows that that's not going to happen. And they have this like wordless exchange at the end where he's had, and I think this is so real. And I've kind of thought about this a lot where, he's had this journey. She's been this tool for him to understand humanity better, and is this sort of like notch in his belt of human experience and growth. She's just looking for like a safe harbor to like live her life. She doesn't need to like.
Well, she wants to be away from him, and I think that
she wants. Say that. What do you mean?
She wants to escape. She wants to get away from him. She wants to get away from Calvinism. She wants to get away from.
Oh no, I was talking about.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nikki.
You're talking about Nikki.
I was talking about
Nikki.
Nikki.
Sorry, it was
Nikki.
Sorry, right. Yeah, Nikki.
Nikki wants. She's not looking for experience. She's not looking for self-knowledge. She's looking for like literally a safe world.
Right. Nikki's an outlier who doesn't buy, who just is not, she refuses to be a part of capitalist society. She does not want to engage in the capitalist template.
Yeah. Yeah. She's one of those tragic people that's kind of too smart to be in the specific line of work that she's in, and too free to work as a
secretary or a barista
or go to school and do even more, because she understands nurse. The like nihilism of it.
Well, and also, yeah, it's the same old story. It's the oldest profession in the world, and so. There's no denying the fact that but that job is there, but it's also, and it pays well.
But what Schrader's doing, and it's such a so I'm gonna bring this back to our podcast that we did on Sweetie, where Sweetie is sort of a metaphor for everyone else's like not having their shit together, and when Sweetie dies, spoiler alert, everyone sort of grows a little bit. But you kind of want to be like, hey, Sweetie's not a fucking metaphor. Sweetie's a human being. And when Nikki leaves the picture right as his daughter comes back into his, there's this very smooth transition. And it's both this metaphorical, like very like neat sort of thing to do with your screenplay. But also Schrader is like, no, this is real. This woman is a real person who is looking to be pulled out of this shitty life that she has, who she's willing to like go on this like fucking like weeks long road trip to find this random guy's daughter, because her life's really not giving her anything. And it's both a very precise, good screenplay type thing, because she was a stand-in for the daughter. The daughter's back. She's going to go away. But it's also like, Nikki's a real person.
Well, and you talk about Sweetie, the Jane Campion film, and in that movie, Sweetie she's probably bipolar, and
at least, yeah,
she's certainly on the spectrum, and she's victim of incest abuse.
Some.
So there's that element of disposability where this person, the family is really waiting for her to self-destruct, and if they as we see what happens with Sweetie, because the mom, we're not going to call the cops. This is a family matter. We're going to take care of it ourselves, and as a result, Sweetie dies, and there's almost a relief at that point. You know, it's a brilliant film. I really like Sweetie a lot, and you even as an audience member, you have a certain sense of relief that Sweetie has died because there was nothing good in her future, and it was directly as a result of her family.
Right, and in this, it's an uplifting thing. You know, the last sequence of this movie made me think about what if Chinatown worked out. You know, it's a very similar final sequence really on that street with the with the cars and Boyle kills the guy and
fumbling with the gun.
And I
that was the false note, was that, you know, Boyle the private detective kills the guy in the street, but the cops don't even arrest him. They don't put handcuffs on him or anything.
That's such a classic trope. Is the cops show up and just like, some guy who's like, you know, on a mission of vengeance has shot someone, and the cops are like, oh, it must have been justified based on like the way
that to me is the weakest.
Based on the way Mel Gibson is swaggering, this was a justified murder.
It's the weakest part of the movie, and also Schrader displaces Jake's duty as our protagonist
to kill him.
Not to necessarily kill him, but to bring that crisis decision to a head. And because he just substitutes the private detective so that Jake can be off the hook. Well, that's a little muddy. I thought that was a little muddy.
I think that's an interesting critique, and that scene did feel weak to me, and I kind of wasn't sure what it was saying about Boyle, where he is. I mean, to just break it down into two pieces. He can't pull his gun out at all, and it's a very tiny little snub nose thing. It's like a 22.
Yeah,
but then suddenly from 60 feet away, he fucking shoots this guy like 4 times. So it's like, literally, what are you saying? Like, is he good at guns or bad at guns? You know, like what do you
Yeah, and also how much good have you really done for the world, you know, that you killed this guy? You know, it's a little Taxi Driver-ish.
It gives catharsis, right? Like you killed the bad guy.
It's a false catharsis.
Yeah, and I also think it's for our remake that we're gonna make on this movie, because I feel like if there's any movie we've watched that we would make a remake of, it's this one.
What would you call it? Well, you know, because hardcore is such a great title, but for modern day,
revenge porn.
You'd have maybe that's it, revenge porn, or just revenge porn, I guess.
Or just hot amateur teen.
Well, you probably made more money with that title.
And but yeah, you need that catharsis of someone being killed, I guess. But also the truer thing is Rotan gets away.
Mm-hmm.
IRL.
Mm-hmm.
It's still out there. Mm-hmm. It's not like we've tamed the dark, sinister things of this. You know, like being overly puritanical is a problem. Never talking about sex is a problem. You know, but people aren't wrong that when you open those floodgates, you do need boundaries, and I think. You know, this is a balanced view of like the checks and balances of being open about sex. Is there is exploitation. There is even a tendency to go more towards like the inhuman and the psychopathic and the murderous. That is in there, you know. It's also, as plenty of other movies show, in Iowa, in the lily white towns, there's plenty of...
Grand Rapids, Michigan.
In Grand Rapids, Michigan. Oh, it's Grand... Yeah, it is Michigan. Why do I keep saying Iowa?
I don't know.
I actually know I thought of Iowa as because with their church group thing, that there were 2 churches and they had buses, and one was from Iowa, one was from Michigan. But yeah, it's Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
There's inhumanity everywhere. It is in Grand Rapids as much as it is in California.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also humanity everywhere, you know? And our character Nikki, I think, is the sort of
I think she's the real protagonist in the movie.
Yeah.
She's the heroine. She's the one who enables the I don't know, the clarity.
Kristen, the daughter, I don't think she passes the Bechdel test. she's a non-character, really. I feel like the cousin. I thought the movie was going to be about the blonde cousin, honestly, because she had a lot more. Maybe that was a sort of red herring that's thrown in, but she had a lot more presence in the movie. From her like two scenes. Two or three scenes.
Well, I watched this movie on Amazon streaming. I paid the $4, $3.99. I don't know why. I don't know why everything has to be $99, $3.99 for 48 hours. I have to say, come on, give it to me for a week. I want to be. If I'm going to go back and watch it, I want more than just an extra day.
All right, Bezos, we're calling you out.
To go back and look at it, but it does bring up the point that we love you all, listeners, from parts far and wide. And if you would like to help us keep the podcast going, if you go to colesmithy.com, you can click on the link to Patreon. And even if you just were to give us $5 a month, pledge $5 of your support a month, that would help keep the podcast going, because obviously we need things like better headphones and, stuff. And we have to buy the beer too.
If we're doing housekeeping, I'm gonna do some plugs right now. I'm gonna do a plug for a live radio show I'm doing twice a month on kpiss.fm. Go to kpiss.fm. I got Mike versus.
Is that a porn site?
You'll find out. It's a live show that also turns into a podcast. It's Mike versus Meaning of Life on Sundays at 9. Also, I want to give a plug for my friend who goes by Emily Martha, who was on the Dirtcast from Jezebel talking about Kabbalah today and why celebrities aren't as into it. Go check that one out. I think it dropped on June 13th.
Wait a minute, did you say kpiss.com?
kpiss.fm. Stayoff.com. 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 It's .fm.
Glad you reiterated that.
kpiss.fm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's neat because they're live shows, so they're not really going to be edited, but they turn into podcasts. So that's an interesting format. We should, some night if you want to do it, we should probably talk logistics off the air. But if you wanted to come to Brooklyn at 9 p.m. on a Sunday, we could just do our show live and then repost it on here and on KPIS.
Are there golden showers? This is golden stream. It's kind of crazy, man.
So they really are kind of doing having it both ways. Is they both deny that it's a urine based pun, but also it's very
yellow.
Yeah,
it's yellow.
So they're building this thing on top of it. It's like a radio tower, in miniature, with a giant yellow drop coming off of it. But yeah, it's the Golden Stream, the kpiss.fm. Yeah. We actually
what a segue.
We actually just got a bunch of Kushner money because it's such a Trumpian concept to have this stream of.
There you go. There you go. Well, thank you all so much for listening. Please tell your friends, like us wherever you can find us. If you're listening on SoundCloud, you can like us there, and of course you can find all of our previous podcasts. There's been over 50 now, I believe, on colesmithy.com.
More than that, I think.
Yeah, that's what I mean. More than that. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
So thank you all, and we will be back next week. Bonsoir.